I know when some of y'all saw the title of that videos, y'all heart dropped. In the same way my heart dropped when I got this email right here. Hi, Derrick. I'm looking for a therapist, and Kaiser provided me with a list of preferred African American therapists that included you. During my research, I found your interview with Jeff Friedman on trauma, which was disturbing. First, is racism one of the areas where you have evolved? And most of all, although you are listed as an African American therapist, are you open to accepting African American male clients? Uncomfortable questions for me to ask, but I want to make sure we don't waste each other's time and money. Thank you very much. For a while now, I have thought about that podcast and the interview. I did it in May. It was around May 15, middle of May of 2020, which was right around as the pandemic was really just starting to get started. Like, we had no idea how bad it was going to be. And it was just now starting at that point. And this person reached out to me and he said, "Hey, look, I'm doing a podcast about trauma. I've seen some of your comments about trauma. Would you like to discuss it?" And I was like, yes, I was excited. This was back at a time before anyone knew who I was. No one cared what I had to say. I had about 1,000 real good subscribers on my YouTube channel. We used to walk down the street and talk through things with each other, but no one really cared what I had to say. I was still a therapist that didn't take any stances on anything. In fact, you know how I talk about the CBT therapists? I was basically a CBT therapist, but like a family therapist. In terms of my social media presence, I hadn't really decided the type of therapist that I wanted to be. What did I want to portray? I went on their show and we talked about trauma for the first part of the show. And at one point, he asked me, "Well, what do you think about racism?" Y'all, I just used to have some views that are just not in line with the way that I see things right now. And so we're going to listen to the clip in question because I've surmised what point the person might be talking about my views on racism.
Right, right. And so South Louisiana is actually more what people would consider liberal than North
Yeah,
Louisiana because it's one of
sure.
those coastal places. So, and I didn't get to spend much time in South Louisiana. I definitely was in the northern part. But again, and I mean, my school flag was a Confederate flag. Like I tell people that here in Seattle, and they have a conniption fit every time. And I try to explain to them there are some people where that flag, when they say it's about Southern pride, they legitimately mean it. They mean Southern pride. Southern pride to see you be upset about stuff, right? The fact that it upsets you is funny to them, right? So it doesn't mean that it was great and comfortable, but yeah, there's definitely a world of parts of difference between those two places.
So I want to talk about that real quick because I haven't listened to myself on this interview. This is my first time. You notice how I said like it wasn't that great and comfortable, and I didn't really go into detail about it? I forgot how much denial I was in about how uncomfortable it felt to be in Louisiana. I never really expressed the way that I felt about that. Y'all, in Louisiana, just man, going into a store was uncomfortable. And there was this weird existence that you had there because the South is known for Southern hospitality and how nice everyone is. And they will be nice to you, like on the surface. There are people that will, on the surface, be very, very nice to you. And there are just small things that they do that just like gives away that it's not genuine. And you have to like delude yourself into believing that it's your fault. And one way to do that is just to downplay that experience of I completely just downplayed what that felt like. I was afraid to go out after certain times at night. Like I was afraid to go shopping. And I never liked to leave the house. I didn't like to go anywhere. I didn't like to go to new places. I didn't like to try new restaurants in the South because you don't know what kind of owners there are. You don't know whether they're like nice people. And I didn't really have a good understanding of where the liberal parts of town were in the city that I lived in. I know that we had one gay bar called the Corner Bar, and I remember everyone used to be upset about that. I think I used to be upset about it because I was in like a whole Christian. Oh God, it's all connected. The point is, I never really realized how I used to describe that experience. I used to describe that experience in such a way that did not give it the real like weight that it deserves. It was terrifying. It was terrifying being underneath that. And making jokes is a way to try to deal with that, you know? It really does hurt people that Southern pride, your Southern pride to have your monuments or the Southern pride to keep your songs. Dixie was our school song, man. The Southern pride that people have, it causes immense feelings of shame in other folks. Shame and guilt and just all sorts of stuff that wouldn't be there if our country didn't have the history that we had. It wouldn't cause all of that if that flag wasn't associated with all those things. And I'm in awe of the way that I just downplayed it really hard.
So around the topic of racism, since you mentioned that, so I've heard. I mean, there's in the Pacific Northwest there's racism as well, but it just is
Absolutely.
sort of manifests in a different kind of way. I was wondering how would you compare the experience of racism in the real South where you really were versus
Yeah.
in the Pacific Northwest, Seattle
Racism is
area?
something that I don't feel like can be objectively defined, because what's racist to me might not be racist to you, right? So
No, I
whenever I
agree with
came,
it, but I'm saying the experience, just your observations from
I
it's
can't give
obviously
you it's my
yeah.
observations are flawed because I'm a subjective creature that is subject to biases. So I'm trying to give you my overall view of it, and what I'm
No, but I'm
saying is,
asking you, what are your
what
including
what
your biases?
yeah, what are my views? I think that if somebody wants to be offended by something, they're going to be offended.
You know what? I used to actually believe that. I did. I did. I used to believe that. First off, I want to talk about what's happening here. I'm going to let me go because I can tell that I am about to go off on a tangent. I don't remember everything that I said, but I can tell I'm about to go off. I think that now, though, because of the changes I've made, I understand why I'm going off. And if I could go back in time and just be like a thought in my mind, what I would tell myself is that you are angry right now because this person is crossing a boundary. They are violating a boundary 3 times. 3 times. I have shown that this is not a question I want to answer right now. That is the tone that is in my voice. I am in a roundabout way saying, please stop asking me this. That's not what we're here to talk about. I can't answer the question that you're trying to ask, or at least I didn't believe that I could because I hadn't come up with a definition of racism that included my experiences. Because all my experiences of racism, I defined them away. I made it my fault. And so here, I feel like I am reacting to the fact that I am being asked a question that you wouldn't ask any other person on your show. There is no white people that he's asking on his show to define racism and tell them about their experience of it. And again, I will own everything that I have said. I don't agree with it anymore. So let's see what I say next.
I think the types of racism that happen in Seattle, it depends on your perspective. To me, it's not racist for someone to tell me that I sound articulate. It's annoying. It's frustrating. I don't like it when people make assumptions about me, but that's not racist because my standard of reference for racism is people sweeping up KKK flyers off the floor. It's people saying the N-word out in public. It's people like with the way that they look at you when you walk into a store that lets you know that you're not really there for help. But what I'm saying is the same things happen in Seattle. The same.
Okay, let's talk about that. I just love how I'm telling on myself. It's okay. We're healed. We're different. First off, do y'all hear how extreme my definition of racism is? You mean you got it? One, I don't even know if I've ever seen anyone sweep KKK flyers off before. I know I've heard it. I've seen the KKK. Don't get it twisted. You know what? See, I still got. I've seen the K. I've not seen flyers. I know where the KKK was in Louisiana. I know where they were. They let you know where they were. They did. So that part was not an exaggeration. The issue is though, I had to define racism so extremely in order to be able to survive, y'all. Like, in order to exist, I needed a definition of racism that was so extreme so that I didn't see every single little incident and interaction I had as racist. I know that people are going to say, well, that's because not everything is racist. No, the system and the world that we live in, the policies that are created are de facto racist. And those experiences that I was just describing are all a result of racism. It's not about annoying. Yes, it's annoying. It's annoying because it's racist. You wouldn't think that I spoke so articulately if you had a conceptualization of black people that wasn't monolithic in the same way that mine was to a degree because I felt disconnected from my community. I own my words. I own what I say. I am responsible, and this is accountability. I own how I used to feel. I don't feel that way anymore, and it is just, I am just blown away at just how I used to feel about it. I didn't realize I used to feel this way about it. I didn't understand it. I couldn't connect it until I went back and looked at it. But I'm going to continue and see what other ways I put my foot deep and firmly within my mouth.
I've walked into stores and felt uncomfortable, but it's not their responsibility to make me feel comfortable.
That is, let's stop there. I mean, it kind of sort of is. It really is. Not to make me feel comfortable. At a very base level, though, I shouldn't feel uncomfortable, antagonistic. I shouldn't feel like when I walk in, I need to check. Like, for example, to this day, I can't go shopping at more than one store at a time because I'm so concerned that when I go into the store, someone is going to think I'm trying to steal some shit. And I've never been able to connect to that feeling. I always thought it was anxiety. That's what I was told by therapists. Oh, it's just anxiety. No, it is not just anxiety. It's not social anxiety disorder. That is the fact that I live, again, in a country where if a white person feels offended by my presence, I could lose my life at any point in time. And that is a hard thing to accept. It's a hard thing to believe. And if you can't believe that, you come up with something else like it's my anxiety. I have anxiety in stores for a reason. There's only a few situations where it's appropriate to say that it's not your responsibility to make someone feel comfortable. The problem is the energy that I am saying this with right now. I am mad. I am mad at him for asking this question. I'm mad because I don't understand why I'm mad. What I'm really upset about is that there is this part of me inside of me like, no, you would have been a completely different person if you were not afraid, if you were not annoyed, if all of this weren't true, you would have expressed yourself differently.
So what I'm saying is we're talking about a concept that only makes sense depending on the person who's using the word, right? So I don't know what you mean when you say racism. That's the biggest delusion that we are under as a species, is that we can understand what each other means when we say something. So I would need you to define racism for me.
Sure,
And then
I'm not going to totally define it, but I'll just give you my one of the reasons, one of my reference points to this is I've only been I've never been to Seattle. I've been to Portland, Oregon, and I remember reading some things over the past couple of years. But I went there like a couple of years ago for this conference, and I'd heard like that Portland in particular has a history of a lot of racism, even though it's seen as this sort of bastion of like progressive ideas and so forth. And I remember. Anyway, in my Enterprise rent-a-car, and the guy that was driving me to the Enterprise rent-a-car place happened to be black, and I forget where he's originally from. I think maybe North Carolina, or I forget exactly where he was from, but I remember he told me he was a veteran. I just decided I'm going to ask him about what his experience was in Portland.
I wish that I was the person that I am now back then, because I would have said, why did you ask that man that? Why? Why did you ask him that? He was going on about his day, minding his own business. You don't know. It is so traumatizing for white people to ask about racism all the time. We are not here to educate you. And I used to think that I was conditioned and bred to believe that it was my job to educate white people on racism. And I am sure that this part of me, deep inside of me, at this interview, was pissed at that I didn't address this. I'm telling y'all now, if I am ever on another interview about something completely different and someone asks me about racism, I swear I will say it's not my job to educate you. In fact, there was a time on TikTok where someone asked me what a microaggression was, and I sent them to Google. Unless this man gave that veteran $350 for answering this question, that was a boundary violation. You just asserted your right. I feel like you should give me the information that I am asking you. I wish I would have addressed that back then. In fact, I should get him to change this from the situational therapist. This was Derrick Horde LMFT. This was not the situational therapist, because I would have handled that so much differently. Oh, I would handle that so much differently now.
And as far as racism, and he just said that compared to, I think he was from North Carolina, and he said like, yeah, compared to there, that it was, he would say it was like microaggressions, where stuff where he grew up was a lot more overt.
It doesn't matter if it's a microaggression. A microaggression is still racism. I made an entire video about microaggressions and racism in therapy. And there are therapists who don't think that what they're doing is racist because it's a microaggression.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but like the thing is, again, I just look at it like when people say Seattle is racist, Portland is racist, the South is racist. The South is a geographical location. Portland and Seattle are cities. Places can't be racist, and people forget that, and then they start putting these attributes on places, and it's a grave mistake to make. So when I hear you say I'm not gonna define racism, that's a problem. That's a problem. It's a huge problem.
Okay, so I'm trying, y'all. I'm not gonna sit here and knock on my past self for saying stuff that I wouldn't have said unless I went through the healing that I went through. Now, I refuse to do that. I was doing the best that I could at the time, and now that I know different, I'm about to show you. Number one, places can't be racist. If I am talking about strict communication theory and syntax and all that stuff, can a place be racist? No, because a place doesn't make choices. A place doesn't make decisions. People can make up a place. Like, it was just the level of semantics there for that to be true. It's true, but it's true for an asshole reason, for a point I'm trying to make that I wouldn't make if I had different information. And secondly, I am proud of myself because I am trying to be on his ass about defining racism. And I didn't know why I was doing it back then, but the answer to this question should have been asking him. I should have put the question back. This shouldn't have been me answering questions about race. That's not what this was about. I should have flipped that back. I should have said, how would me answering that question help you? What is it specifically that you want to know? Why do you want to know my experience specifically? And what does that have to do with what we're talking about? And because I had not connected racism and trauma, because that's not what I was taught in school, I didn't get that education. In my master's program, we did not discuss this. And it is on me to learn and educate myself. And it sucks that I'm having to learn this way or had to learn the hard way. That's fine. I'm glad that I know now.
It's a huge problem. So that's why I don't answer
I mean, I
questions
could
like
define
this.
it. I just felt like I didn't, didn't feel like it.
Yeah, I have so many couples in my private practice with the same, they say the same things. I didn't feel like I had to define that. Yeah, that's why you're in my office. That's why you're in my office. It's a grave mistake. That's the biggest problem we have as a country. And it breaks my heart. It's my ultimate platform. We have to define what we mean when we say things. Because if I answer that question the way that you just asked it, and someone researches me and I answer from my own subjective thing, not giving the explanation about it, someone can soundbite that, make a clip of it, and then I sound like a terrible person, right? So I think it's super important that we take time to slow down. What do you mean when you say racist? What do you mean by these things? Help me understand.
So since you're not gonna you're gonna be
an ass about it, that's what was coming. If you're gonna be an ass about it, I know that's what was coming. Or if you're gonna be I would not let someone talk to me like that now. I would not let someone talk to me like that now. I would never let someone talk to me like that. I would let white people talk to me like that back then. I would. White supremacy will have you outside in a rain jacket with an umbrella that is made of cloth.
And I would define it as saying, in terms of actions, like using derogatory slurs with no disregard for the implications behind that, violent acts based on people based on their perceived skin color or sexual orientation. I mean, that's
what's interesting to me? Why we don't apply that to people of color as well. It's very, very frustrating to hear things like, and that's one thing that I've heard in Seattle that frustrates me, is that Black people can't be racist. That's just
right.
Not
I've
true.
heard that before too.
That's super frustrating to me. So by the definition that you are describing, then yeah, that's cool as long as we apply equally. And the only reason that I say that is because I'm Black. I can say that. I can say that because I'm Black. Black people will get mad at me about it. But if you were to say, Jeff Friedman, that I feel like Black people, if you were to do that, it would just, and that's ridiculous to me. That's a strange situation. We're not going to solve problems if we have one standard for one set of people and one standard for another.
I'm not laughing at you. I am laughing at how funny it is when you are on the right side of the tracks. Okay, let's break that down. Ooh, boy, I was mad. So look, the reason that I am this angry and sounding like Candace Owens about this is because of the part where I talk about the Black community. I, again, did not know that there were other Black folks that shared my experience of feeling other. I had no idea. And so that was a way I really believe to lash out at all of the people that I felt like didn't accept me. Like, here's something that I know that if I say, it will upset you. And Black people cannot be racist if you have a full definition of what racism is. And that's what's missing here. I really, man, I would have taken him to task. Oh, I would have taken him to task had I known what I know now. Man, because that definition of racism does not include the laws. It doesn't include the systems. It doesn't include the built-in discrimination. It doesn't include acknowledgement of the racist history. It doesn't include any of that. It doesn't include any of that. And then for me to say, and this reminds me of what pastors do all the time, and then for me to say we can't have equality if there's one set of standards for what people. Yes, that's the point. That's the point. That's the point. It's just hard to see that point when you are trying to delude yourself from the fact that any white person at any poverty level, anywhere, just on the strength of the fact that they are white, can ruin a Black person's life just because they feel inconvenienced. Just because they feel inconvenienced. And again, it's a hard truth to accept. And not accepting it can have you saying things that you have to go back on and look at and say why. And I know why. I know why. A combination of not knowing and feeling ostracized by my community.
If a white man, a straight white male who says it the way that I do, like, and I know I'm up and uppity about it right now, but if there's a straight white male who makes the
You're triggered, sir. You're triggered. That's what's going on. You are triggered right now. You are in a situation where basically this white man has asked you, prove to me that you understand racism in the way that I would like for you to understand it so that I can know. Like, conversations like this happen all the time. I didn't understand what it meant to be a straight white male. I had no idea how that term was being used. I didn't understand what it meant for a hit dog to holler. I didn't get all of this language that is coded in our community about our experiences. I didn't understand it because I wasn't a part of it. So whenever I saw, especially with the type of therapy training that I had, whenever I saw straight white males, I assumed, you know what, we're using a term that's just gonna push people away. No one's gonna want to change if we use language like that. How are we gonna get people's attention? And there's some truth to that. There's absolutely some truth to that. And if it doesn't apply, let it fly. I was unable to see how that term is not offensive to someone unless they are part of the folks that it describes. I really wish I could lie. I'm gonna tell you the truth. If I could lie and say I'm doing this on purpose as a way to be satirical and talk about this man in front of his face without him knowing, I really wish I could say that. I can't. I really believe this stuff. And it was like, what, 5/12/2020, less than a year ago. I'm so glad I got it before I went into coronavirus, though, because I think coronavirus happened not too shortly after. And if I still had all these views and stuff, I would have been out at the rallies, if you know, goodness gracious. But the point is,
Yeah, I'm going to really push the point. That's going to be my platform. I'm going to push the point. I want people to define what they mean when they say stuff, because if not, it's an assumption. And we see where assumptions get us. We'd be using Discord.
Oh, right. Yes, we would be. But, well, I mean, I don't know.
all right, so one, I want to explain why he acted like that. When we first were going to do our interview, we said that we were going to do Discord, and there was an assumption that I knew how to use Discord because I was young, and I didn't. And so that's the joke I was making. We actually used a different platform, but I said, you know, if we were watch our assumptions, we'd be using Discord right now. We'd absolutely be using Discord if we'd watched our assumptions, and like that was the only thing that I really called out. And then we quickly changed the subject back to trauma, and I want to answer that question now with the new knowledge and stuff that I have. I would say, in order to understand the relationship between trauma, we got to make sure we're talking about the same thing. How do you define trauma? And I would first start with, Trauma is memory of an event that just shouldn't have happened. The bodily memory, the emotional memory, the physical memory, the memories and the stories that we tell, it's like a virus. It's something that should never have happened. And the memory of that event continues to affect the way that people behave for generations to come. And in America, we start with the trauma that the indigenous people of this land experienced. And then we talk about the trauma of, and we talk about it all. We talk about it all. And make sure that before you start talking about trauma, make sure that you have dealt with your own trauma of your own people, of your own existence, of your own understanding. Make sure you know who you are, understand how you got there, and have reconciled those things before you ever start talking about trauma or specializing in a particular area of trauma. I am so glad that I did not bill myself as a racial trauma therapist. I would not have been helpful at all. I would have been out here being a mouthpiece for white supremacy. It is but by the grace of the universe that I am not out here being the therapy equivalent of Candace Owens, because man, I could do some damage. I am telling you, all the resentment that I had for my own people, I could do some damage. And I'm not gonna let people make me feel guilty or shameful for what I used to believe. That's not even the worst of what I used to believe. I used to believe that if you were gay, you were going to hell. I used to think all sorts of terrible things about people that I believed were sinners. I know that I have changed. Take a look at this picture of me talking about Kobe Bryant's death very disrespectfully and who you were looking at now. I know there's a difference. Let me take this headset off. To think that I wear earrings now it's I cannot believe, like, the past version of me would not accept that. There's no way. There's no way. There's no way you've changed that much. And it is hard because our society does not allow people to change. It just doesn't. It just doesn't. They make it difficult. And sometimes it's difficult because the person doesn't want to change. They don't want to know anything different. They don't want to know how to behave better. They don't. They believe that they are right. And sometimes it's difficult because there are people who know that they are wrong, who know that they just need new information, and the only way they get it is someone yelling at them or telling them what they're doing wrong instead of telling them what they could do right, which is why I can't stand that parents spank their kids so much, because you're not teaching them anything. Even though I recognize that there are some parents who are probably in that same situation I'm describing who feel like I'm just spanking them every single time. And the information is out there. It's available. Google is a free resource. It's there. The question is it being said by someone who you think understands? And there's not very many people speaking in a way that shows that people understand to even break through those defenses. Long story short, I am sorry for the way I said these things, for what I said, from the place of pain that it came from. I am so sorry that I used to believe those things. And I'm not going to sit and beat myself up about it, because I know that I have changed. It is not on me to convince you that I don't believe those things anymore. It's not. You have to decide if you trust yourself, trust in your ability to make decisions, and trust in your decision to trust that I'm telling the truth. All of those three things have nothing to do with me. I've given my accountability. I've given account. I've discussed it. That's what happens when you grow up in the conservative South and you don't feel like your community accepts you because they all believe that spanking is okay. You would rather deny that racism is real than accept that spanking is an abuse. And that was the choice that I felt like I was saddled with until I had an experience, until I had an understanding. So I hope that this video was informational. If y'all have questions, we could talk about it. I just need to get this out the way because I don't know. It's just so funny to me. Back then, people didn't care what I was saying, and now people do. And you know what I think about? In the same way that I'm dealing with this right now, not really dealing with it because it's done. I mean, I got to go edit the video, which is going to take some time. The point that I'm making is there are parents who are uploading videos of their children as they spank them, and those videos don't go away. Just like this podcast don't go away. In fact, I'm going to email Mr. Free. Y'all want to check out my email? This one I'm going to send him. Hi, Jeff. I hope you're doing well. We did a podcast back on May 5th of 2020 about trauma. And I had some views back then, particularly on racism, that I don't agree with anymore and see differently because of some changes I've made in my life. At first, I was going to ask you to take down the video, but I changed my mind. What I want you to do is please post the following update to all the platforms and descriptions of where this content is posted. And the update will say, my name is Derrick Horde, also known as the Situational Therapist. At the time of this interview, I held views about racism in a perspective that was partly informed by my feelings of exclusion from the Black community. I had not yet found my community within the community and thus spoke in monolithic terms about my own people. Racism is an act of an exclusion done by the dominant social group, and that dominant social group is white. There are centuries of policies, practices, and procedures that were put in place by that group that disproportionately cause physical, mental, and emotional suffering for Black people and other people of color. I really hope he posts it. In fact, I'm going to demand it. I'm going to demand it because I don't want there to be, it's out there. I just hope people, when they're doing their research, they come across this too. Y'all take care. I'll see y'all soon. Bye.